The lament configuration opened in Vexith's hands, and reality screamed. Not the familiar shriek of the warp tearing open, not the ecstatic wail of demonic manifestation, but something colder, more mathematical, like the universe itself solving an equation it had never wanted to answer. Sorcerer Lord Vexith of the Emperor's Children watched as geometric patterns carved themselves into the air before him, precise angles that hurt to perceive. Lines of force that followed rules older than the Chaos Gods themselves. He stood in the center of his ritual chamber aboard the ecstatic agony, his warship drifting in the outer darkness of a daemon world called Sublime's End. Around him, 12 of his finest noise marines knelt in a circle, their armor painted in obscene purples and pinks, their sonic weapons laid reverently at their feet. They had come seeking the ultimate sensation, the perfect experience that would elevate them in the eyes of Slaanesh. For 3 centuries, Vexith had searched for this artifact, following whispers through slave markets and torture pits, trading secrets with dark Eldar homunculi and extracting confessions from inquisitors before flaying them alive. The box itself was beautiful in a way that made his enhanced eyes water. 9 centimeters on each side, its surfaces covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift when observed directly. Not brass like Khorne's symbols, not rotting like Nurgle's tokens, not constantly changing like Tzitzion's gifts. This was something else entirely. The configurations he had manipulated to open it followed patterns that his warp-touched mind struggled to comprehend. Each twist and turn of the puzzle pieces felt like it was unlocking something fundamental, not in the materium or the immaterium, but in the space between spaces where neither realm held dominion. The tear in reality expanded, but wrong. Warp rifts bled and pulsed with organic chaos. This opening was clean, surgical, its edges meeting at perfect 90-degree angles. Through it, Vexith could see a place that was not a place. Corridors that extended into impossible distances. Walls made of flesh that had been geometrically arranged into pleasing patterns. Chains hanging from ceilings that disappeared into darkness above. And walking through those corridors, approaching the opening with measured, unhurried steps, came 4 figures. The first to emerge stood taller than a space marine, its body wrapped in black leather that creaked with each movement. Chains hung from its flesh, each link precisely placed, each hook driven through skin at mathematically perfect intervals. Its face was a grid of pins, hundreds of them, arranged in neat rows and columns that had been hammered directly into the skull beneath. Where eyes should have shown pain or madness, there was only calm intelligence, ancient and utterly focused. When it spoke, its voice carried none of the warp's distortion, none of chaos's fevered passion. The box, you opened it. We came. The words were simple, delivered with the flat certainty of absolute fact. Behind this leader came 3 others, each a masterwork of deliberate modification. One had chattering teeth where its mouth should be. The jaw extended and multiplied until the entire lower face was a mass of clicking, gnashing dental work. Another was female in form, her throat opened to reveal the glistening interior, tubes and wires threaded through the wound with surgical precision. The last was corpulent, its body swollen but not with Nurgle's rot, instead with a kind of deliberate excess, skin pulled tight and pierced with decorative implements. Vexith stepped forward, his own form a monument to Slaanesh's gifts. His armor sang with the souls of those he had tortured, their screams still echoing in the living metal. His face had been surgically perfected 1,000 times, each modification seeking the ultimate in beauty until he had transcended such simple concepts entirely. He looked upon these newcomers and saw kindred spirits, fellow seekers of sensation's outer limits. "Welcome, daemons of the Prince of Pleasure," Vexith proclaimed, his voice amplified by the Vox systems in his armor to reach ecstatic volumes. "I am Sorcerer Lord Vexith, and I have summoned you to grant me ultimate experience, to elevate my warband to heights of sensation that will make even the dark gods take notice. Show me pleasures beyond imagination, pains that transcend mere physical limitation. Grant me the power to make entire worlds scream in perfect harmony." The pin-faced being regarded him with something approaching disappointment. When it moved closer, Its steps made no sound despite the chains that should have rattled with each movement. It stopped exactly 2 meters from Vexith, close enough to speak without raising its voice, far enough to maintain what might have been professional distance. "We are not daemons," it said, each word carefully articulated. "We are explorers, in the further regions of experience. Demons to some, angels to others. We are the Cenobites, the Order of the Gash. I am their priest. Some have named me Pinhead. The name is inelegant, but sufficient. You open the lament configuration. You sought experience. We will provide it. But do not presume to command us, and do not insult us by comparing our craft to the crude excess of your warp-spawned masters." Vexith's perfect features twisted into a snarl. The 12 noise marines rose as one, their sonic weapons humming to deadly life. 3 centuries of searching, untold resources expended, whole populations tortured for information, and this thing dared to insult the Dark Prince? The Sorcerer Lord's own psychic power flared, purple lightning crackling around his ornate staff. "You dare speak against Slaanesh?" Vexith's voice resonated with warp energy, the sound alone enough to rupture unaugmented eardrums.
"I have torn the souls from saints and made them beg for damnation."
"I have conducted symphonies of suffering that pleased the Dark Prince himself. You are nothing but conjured servants, bound by the artifact I control." He gestured sharply, and the noise marines opened fire. Sonic weapons unleashed waves of sound powerful enough to liquefy organs and shatter ceramite armor. The contained space of the ritual chamber became a maelstrom of destructive harmonics, the very air vibrating with lethal force. The Cenobites stood unmoved. The sonic assault washed over them like water over stone, the sound waves bending around their forms in ways that violated acoustic principles. Pinhead raised one hand, chains erupting from his palm with thought-defying speed. They shot forward, each link moving independently, seeking targets with intelligent purpose. The first noise marine was wrapped in chains before he could react, the metal links threading through his armor's joints with surgical precision. The chains tightened, not crushing, but pulling in carefully calculated directions. The marine's scream was not the ecstatic wail of a devotee of Slaanesh, but something else entirely, a sound of pure, distilled understanding as his body was disassembled with geometric perfection. 2 more marines charged forward, chainswords revving. The female Cenobite moved to intercept, her movements fluid, despite the tubes that connected her throat to her chest. She caught the first chainsword between her palms, the spinning teeth unable to cut her flesh. With a twist, she redirected the weapon into its wielder, the blade carving through corrupted ceramite as she simultaneously used her free hand to trace patterns across the marine's armor. Where her fingers touched, the metal split open, not melted or broken, but opened along seams that had not existed before, revealing the twisted flesh beneath. The corpulent Cenobite, despite its bulk, moved with disturbing grace. It embraced a charging noise marine in a parody of affection, its many implements finding purchase in the gaps of the ancient armor. What followed was not a fight, but a demonstration, the Cenobite methodically exploring the marine's capacity for sensation, finding nerves that centuries of chaos corruption had not destroyed, and teaching them new meanings of stimulus. Shatterer lived up to its nature, teeth gnashing as it approached 2 marines who had taken defensive positions behind an altar of obsidian. The clicking, chattering sound it made bypassed their audio filters, reaching directly into their enhanced brains. Both warriors clutched their helms, dropping their weapons. Chatterer moved between them, its hands reaching out to physically remake them, each touch deliberate, purposeful, transforming their bodies into configurations that their demonically gifted flesh found impossible yet could not resist. Vexith launched a psychic assault, purple fire leaping from his staff toward Pinhead. The warp energy dissipated before reaching the Cenobite, not blocked or deflected, but simply ceasing to exist in his presence. Pinhead walked through the fading flames, his pace never changing, his expression never shifting from that calm, analytical regard.
"You mistake power for artistry,"
Pinhead said, now standing directly before the Sorcerer Lord. "Your chaos gods grant you strength, but no understanding. They give you sensation without structure, pleasure without purpose. You are children playing with tools you do not comprehend. Chains erupted from every surface of the ritual chamber simultaneously, thousands of them, moving in concert like a living thing. They caught Vexith's arms, his legs, his torso, lifting him into the air. The Sorcerer Lord thrashed, calling upon Slaaneish's blessings, feeling the familiar rush of warp power flooding his system. His body began to transform, mutations blooming across his flesh, gifts from the Dark Prince meant to break any bondage. The chains did not break. They did not even strain. Instead, they began to move, rotating Vexith's body in precise increments, displaying him like a sculpture on a turntable. Pinhead circled slowly, studying the Chaos Sorcerer with professional interest. Fascinating, Pinhead observed. You have been modified extensively, but without true vision. Each alteration seeking momentary pleasure or power, none building toward a coherent whole. Your body is a journal of desperate excess, not a masterwork of deliberate craft. The other 3 Cenobites had finished with the Noise Marines. What remained were 12 figures still technically alive, their forms reconfigured into geometric arrangements that defied description. They did not scream because their capacity for such simple expression had been transcended. They existed now in states of pure experience, their bodies transformed into living demonstrations of the Cenobites' philosophy. Vexith found his voice, though it came out strangled through the chains restricting his throat. What are you? If not daemons, then what? We are what comes after, Pinhead replied. Your warp is chaos given form, emotion made manifest. We are order through experience, sensation refined to its purest expression. We existed before your chaos gods noticed this reality, and we will exist long after they are forgotten. More lament configurations appeared throughout the chamber, materializing from the geometrically precise tiers in reality. Not duplicates spawning from the original, but new boxes delivered through the dimensional breach, sent by whatever intelligence governed the Cenobites' realm. Each one was identical to the first, perfect in its complexity, waiting to be found by those whose desire would draw them to solve its puzzles. The boxes drifted through the ritual chamber like seeds on a wind, passing through the walls as if they were not there, spreading throughout the ship and beyond. Pinhead gestured to them as they moved. It is not hands that call us, Sorcerer. It is desire, the hunger for experience, for understanding, for sensation stripped of delusion. Your box was merely the first in this sector. Now others will find what you found. Those whose souls reach for us will be ours by right. The others we take only when they stand in our way. He gestured, and the lament configuration, still floating where Vexith had opened it, began to shift. Its pieces, moving of their own accord. The geometric patterns carved into the air expanded, new angles forming, creating additional tiers in reality. Through each opening, more Cenobites emerged, dozens of them, each a unique expression of their particular order. Pinhead turned from Vexith to regard the wider chamber, the corrupted ship beyond, the daemon world outside. His expression, insofar as his mutilated face could show expression, might have been satisfaction. This universe, he said, speaking to his fellow Cenobites now rather than to Vexith, is rich with beings seeking experience. They simply lack guidance, lack artistry in their pursuit. The followers of chaos grasp at sensation like starving animals. The servants of the Corpse Emperor deny their nature while secretly craving what they forbid. Both require our particular expertise. The new boxes continued their drift through the ship, each one a doorway waiting to be opened. Each one a promise of experience for those desperate or curious enough to solve its geometric puzzles. They would spread across the sector, appearing in places where desire was strongest, where the hunger for understanding was greatest, where mortal minds reached out for something beyond the choices their universe offered. We have such sights to show them, Pinhead declared, his voice carrying the certainty of one who had explored sensation's furthest reaches and found infinite depths still waiting to be plumbed. The Cenobites moved through the ship methodically, their presence transforming it section by section into something that was neither chaos-corrupted nor materially pure, but geometrically precise. A third state of existence. And throughout the sector, on other ships, on daemon worlds, even on Imperial vessels where forbidden curiosity lived in desperate hearts, the lament configurations appeared. The boxes waited. They always did. For desire to find them, for hands to turn their pieces, for minds to seek what lay beyond the limited choices of a universe caught between chaos and order. The Cenobites offered a third path, and in the grim darkness of the far future, some would choose it. Inquisitor Covenant of the Ordo Malleus stood at the edge of what had once been the upper spire of Hive Tertius on the world of Carrion Prime, and tried to understand what he was seeing. The distress beacon had reached his battle barge 6 days ago, a standard alert about suspected Slaaneshi cult activity in the pleasure districts. Standard protocol meant a standard response. 2 squads of stormtroopers, 3 sisters of battle, and himself to oversee the purge. He had conducted such operations hundreds of times across his 70 years of service. He expected depravity, certainly. He expected corrupted flesh and twisted devotions to the Dark Prince. He did not expect this. The entire upper third of the Hive Spire, home to approximately 40,000 citizens, had been transformed into something that should not exist. The rockcrete walls remained structurally intact, but their surfaces had been changed, covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Geometric designs that, repeated in ways that seemed to extend into dimensions the human eye could not properly perceive. And everywhere, chains. They hung from ceilings that stretched up into darkness. They emerged from floors. They connected wall to wall in configurations that followed no architectural purpose Covenant could identify. Some were iron, others brass. Still others appeared to be made from materials he could not name, metals that gleamed with colors he had no words for. The citizens remained, after a fashion. They had been incorporated into the architecture itself, their bodies opened and rearranged with what Covenant's augmented eye recognized as surgical precision. A woman hung suspended by chains that entered through her back and emerged from her chest, the metal links threaded through her ribs without damaging the bone structure. Her eyes were open, conscious, aware. Her mouth moved but produced no sound, or rather produced sounds at frequencies beyond human hearing. Around her, 17, others had been similarly displayed, each one positioned at exact intervals, each one still living, still breathing, their bodies transformed into components of some vast design Covenant could not fully comprehend. Sister Seraphine, who had fought beside him through a dozen campaigns against chaos, made the sign of the Aquila and raised her bolter. Her voice came through the Vox link with barely controlled horror. "Slaaneshi corruption, Inquisitor! We must purge immediately before it spreads further!" Covenant raised a hand to stop her. Something was wrong. He had seen Slaaneshi corruption before, studied it extensively as part of his training with the Ordo Malleus. This was different. Chaos corruption was organic, excessive, uncontrolled. It grew and spread like a cancer, each manifestation unique in its wrongness. What he saw before him was ordered, systematic, repeating. Every chain hung at a precise angle. Every body had been modified following clear principles. There was intent. Here, purpose, but not the fevered purpose of chaos. This was cold, calculated, methodical. "Hold fire," he commanded. "Stormtroopers, establish a perimeter. No one enters or leaves. Sister Seraphine, with me. We need to understand what we are dealing with before we can properly combat it." They moved deeper into the transformed spire, their boots making no sound on floors that had been covered in something that was not quite flesh, not quite metal. The material absorbed sound, swallowed light in strange ways. The air tasted wrong, not with the copper tang of blood that usually accompanied Slaaneshi rituals, but with something sterile, antiseptic almost. Covenant's psychic senses, trained over decades to detect warp corruption, registered nothing. No touch of the Imperium, no presence of demonic entities, no lingering trace of chaos ritual. Yet clearly something had been here, had done this, had transformed an entire population into living architecture. They found survivors in What had been a pleasure hall, now converted into something else entirely. 12 citizens huddled in a corner, untouched by the transformation that had claimed their neighbors. They wore the fine clothes of hive nobility, now torn and stained. When they saw Covenant's inquisitorial seal, several began to weep with relief. "Thank the Emperor." One man gasped, his words tumbling over each other. "Angels came, but they were not the Emperor's angels. They promised transcendence to those who sought it." They said they would show ultimate experience to any who asked. Marcia opened the box. It was just a puzzle box. Beautiful, intricate. She loved puzzles. When she solved it, they came. Covenant knelt before the man, his power armor servos whining softly. "Who came? Describe them exactly." The man's eyes went distant, reliving the memory. Tall, wrapped in black leather, covered in chains and implements. Their leader had pins driven into his head, hundreds of them, arranged in perfect rows. They were not daemons. I have seen daemons, Inquisitor. My uncle was possessed once before the ecclesiarchy purged him. These were not that. They were precise. They spoke calmly, made no threats to those who refused, but those who were curious, those who asked questions, those who seemed interested, they took those ones. Some went willingly. Others they simply took when they tried to interfere or stop the process. Sister Seraphine interjected, her voice tight. "What did they offer?" "Experience," the man whispered. "Understanding of sensation beyond anything we had known." They said our world had forgotten how to truly feel, that we either denied our nature like the faithful or indulged it without artistry like the followers of the Dark Prince. They said they could teach us the difference between mere sensation and true experience. Marcia was the first to accept, then others followed. Then they began taking those who stood too close, who watched too intently, who they said carried the desire, even if they would not speak it aloud. Covenant felt cold certainty settling in his augmented heart. This was not chaos, corruption. This was something else, something his training had not prepared him for. He activated his long-range Vox, connecting directly to his battle barge in orbit. "This is Inquisitor Covenant. I need immediate access to restricted inquisitorial noospheric archives, Malleus grade clearance. Authorization code Vermilion Omega-7. Search parameters, extra-dimensional entities, non-warp origin focused on pain and pleasure, geometric manifestation patterns." The response came after a long pause, the Lex Mechanic's voice uncertain. "Inquisitor, we have minimal references in our cipher vaults, cross-referencing with all available sources, including fragmentary Xenos mythological databases." One entry stands out from recovered Eldar texts, references to a place they call the Black Library in their tongue. The fragments describe beings they term the Order of Pain, entities they claim existed before the fall, before Slaaneish's birth. They describe beings that explore sensation as a science rather than an indulgence, who transform flesh into geometric patterns expressing mathematical concepts of suffering and pleasure. The Eldar fear them because they cannot be understood through normal means, cannot be bargained with through typical channels. Covenant processed this information, his mind racing through implications. Before he could respond, Sister Seraphine's motion tracker pinged. Something was approaching from deeper in the transformed spire. He turned, raising his psychic hood, drawing upon the warp to prepare defensive wards. The familiar rush of psychic power flooded through him, and he shaped it into barriers that had stopped demonic assaults, turned aside warp lightning, protected him from corruption that would have destroyed lesser men. Pinhead walked around the corner with measured, unhurried steps, the chains that hung from. His flesh swayed gently with each movement, producing a sound like wind chimes, oddly musical despite their grim purpose. He regarded Covenant and Seraphine with eyes that contained no malice, no hunger, no emotion that either Imperial servant could readily identify. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly, despite making no effort to project. "Inquisitor Covenant, Sister Seraphine, we have been expecting you. Those who investigate will inevitably find what we have done. It is proper that we speak." Seraphine's bolter snapped up, the weapon locked on Pinhead's center mass. "In the name of the God Emperor, identify yourself, abomination." Speak your purpose or face immediate execution." Pinhead tilted his head slightly, the pins in his skull catching the dim light. "Abomination. An interesting choice of words, sister. We are the Cenobites, explorers in the further regions of experience. I am their priest. Some call me Pinhead, though the name lacks elegance. We come not from your warp, not from the Imperium, you know, but from a place between. It is not hands that call us, Inquisitor. It is desire. Those whose souls reach for us, who truly seek what we offer, are ours by right. The others we take only when they stand in our way." Covenant stepped forward, placing himself between Seraphine and the entity. His psychic senses probed at Pinhead, searching for any trace of warp corruption, any hint of demonic nature. He found nothing. It was like trying to grab smoke, but not because Pinhead was hiding his nature. Rather, because there was nothing to find. No connection to the Imperium, no taint of chaos, no signature that his trained senses could identify. Pinhead existed in a way that made no sense within the Imperial understanding of reality. "You claim not to be daemons," Covenant said carefully, his training and interrogation techniques coming to the fore. "Yet you transform human flesh. You alter reality around you. You offer power to those who summon you. How are you different from the ruinous powers?" Pinhead's expression did not change, but something in his posture suggested he was pleased by the question. "The chaos gods you fear are emotion made manifest. Thoughtless passion given form. They offer power but demand worship. They corrupt because they cannot help but corrupt, because their nature is chaos itself. We offer something different. We are order through experience. We do not corrupt. We clarify. We do not destroy. We reveal. Those who come to us, seeking understanding, receive it. Those who interfere in our work become part of it. The distinction matters less than you might think." He gestured back toward the transformed sections of the spire. "Most who you saw incorporated into our work came because they desired to. Each solved the lament configuration, knowing something would answer. Each asked to understand experience beyond their limited comprehension. Some we took because they attempted to stop us, because they placed themselves between us and our purpose. Their desire was implicit in their actions, written in every choice that brought them to that moment." Seraphine's finger tightened on her bolter's trigger. "Lies. No faithful servant of the Emperor would willingly embrace such transformation." "And therein lies the truth you do not wish to acknowledge," Pinhead replied. "Sister, you flagellate yourself daily. Drive pain into your own flesh in worship of your Emperor. You understand that sensation can be transcendent, that suffering can carry meaning. We simply take that understanding to its logical conclusion. The difference between your ritual and ours is merely a matter of degree and honesty about purpose." The Sister of Battle's face flushed with rage behind her helmet. Covenant saw her finger tighten further on the trigger and spoke quickly. "Sister, stand down." "That is a direct order." To Pinhead, he said, "You speak of desire and purpose, but I see citizens who appear to be in constant agony, their bodies violated in ways that mock the Emperor's design for humanity. How is this different from the tortures that Slaneshi cultists inflict?" Pinhead moved closer, and neither Covenant nor Seraphine could quite explain why they did not fire. There was something in his movement, in his presence, that demanded attention rather than reaction. He stopped exactly 3 meters from them, his chains hanging perfectly still despite having moved. The followers of Slanesh seek endless novelty, constantly escalating sensation because they have lost the ability to truly feel, Pinhead explained. They are addicts chasing diminishing returns. We are the opposite. We teach that a single sensation, properly understood, properly experienced, contains infinite depth. The citizens you see are not in agony. They have transcended such simple categorization. They exist in states of pure experience, understanding pain and pleasure as two expressions of the same fundamental truth about consciousness and Covenant felt his certainty wavering, and that terrified him more than any daemon he had faced. His training, his decades of experience, All of it focused on identifying and destroying threats to humanity. But Pinhead was not threatening. He was explaining, teaching, offering a perspective that was utterly alien yet internally consistent. The Inquisitor fell back on doctrine, the bedrock of his faith. The Emperor is the master of mankind. Only through him do humans find purpose. Only through devotion to his vision does humanity survive the darkness. Your philosophy, whatever you claim it to be, divides humanity's focus, weakens the unity of faith that keeps the Imperium strong. Does it? Pinhead asked. Your Emperor sits upon his golden throne, suffering for 10,000 years to maintain humanity's protection. Every day, thousands die to sustain him, their psychic essence consumed to fuel the Astronomicon. Every moment, he endures agony beyond description. His body, a broken shell. His consciousness stretched across the entire Imperium. Inquisitor, Covenant, does your Emperor not understand our art better than anyone? He has experienced millennia of perfect, sustained sensation. He is perhaps the greatest practitioner of our philosophy in your entire reality. The blasphemy of the statement hit Covenant like a physical blow. His psychic defenses flared automatically, golden light erupting around his form. How dare you speak of the Emperor with such presumption? He suffers for humanity's salvation, not for any twisted pursuit of sensation. And yet, he suffers. Pinhead countered calmly. Purpose does not negate experience, Inquisitor. It merely frames it. Your Emperor has chosen 10,000 years of agony for a purpose he deems worthy. We do not question his purpose. We simply recognize his understanding, that experience, even terrible experience, can carry profound meaning. We offer the same understanding to those who seek it. Before Covenant could respond, alarms blared throughout the hive. His vox crackled with urgent reports from his stormtroopers. Inquisitor, we have multiple contacts emerging from the lower levels. Not citizens. Not recognizably human. They match the descriptions of the entities you encountered. More Cenobites, Pinhead confirmed, though Covenant had not spoken the thought aloud. The lament configuration has spread. It always does. Your Imperium is vast, Inquisitor, filled with billions who suffer without meaning, who endure without understanding. Many of them, when offered a choice, when presented with our configurations, choose to seek what we offer. Not because they are weak, not because they are corrupted, but because they recognize truth in our philosophy. Covenant made a decision. His decades of experience told him this entity would not be stopped by bolter fire or psychic assault. It existed outside the normal parameters of threats he was trained to eliminate. He activated his direct vox to Aken, his battle barge, coding the message with highest priority. This is Inquisitor Covenant. I am declaring a sectorial emergency under my authority as Ordo Malleus. Seal all traffic in and out of the carry-on system. Nothing leaves, nothing enters. Send immediate astropathic message to Holy Terra. We have encountered a threat of unprecedented nature. Not chaos, not Xenos, but something that operates outside established classifications. Request immediate guidance from the highest authority. He turned back to Pinhead. You will remain here. You will not spread further, and you will submit to examination so that we may understand what you are and how to contain you. Pinhead's expression might have been amusement. We do not submit, Inquisitor. We are not your prisoners. We exist because we are sought. But I will offer you something. A demonstration of the difference between your understanding and ours. Sister Seraphine, you claim devotion to your Emperor through suffering. You drive nails into your flesh. You fast until your body weakens. You deny yourself comfort in his name. But you do these things without true understanding of what you experience. You have never fully explored the sensations you court. We could show you. We could teach you to understand what your body tells you when you inflict holy pain upon it. Seraphine's response was immediate. She fired, the bolt round exploding from her weapon with a roar that echoed through the transformed spire. The round should have struck Pinhead's center mass, should have detonated and torn his body apart. Instead, chains erupted from the floor between them, catching the bolt mid-flight. The round exploded against the metal links, the blast contained and absorbed. Sister, Pinhead said gently, such violence. You fear what we represent, because you recognize the truth in it. Your Imperium builds itself on suffering, calls it duty, frames it as holy. We simply acknowledge what you practice in denial. One day, you may seek us willingly. When that day comes, we will have such sights to show you. The Cenobite turned and walked back into the shadows of the transformed spire. Covenant considered pursuing, considered calling down orbital bombardment, considered every tool in his arsenal, but something stopped him. A cold certainty that conventional weapons would not work, that conventional thinking would not apply. This threat required understanding before action, analysis before purge. The astropathic message would take weeks to reach Terra. The response would take weeks more. In the meantime, boxes were appearing across the sector, delivered through dimensional breaches that opened where desire was strongest. And with each appearance, citizens made choices, solved puzzles, sought experiences they had been denied. Not all of them, perhaps not even most, but enough. Always enough. Covenant looked at the transformed citizens suspended in their geometric arrangements, still living, still conscious, existing, in states of experience he could not comprehend. He thought of the Emperor upon his throne, suffering for millennia, in service to humanity. He thought of Pinhead's words, and despite his training, despite his faith, he could not entirely dismiss them as simple heresy. That uncertainty, that moment of doubt, terrified him more than any daemon ever had. The warp rift tore open above Carrion Prime's third moon with the familiar scream of the Imperium breaching reality, and daemons poured through like water from a broken dam. Keeper of secrets, Nekari materialized first, its towering form a grotesque display of twisted beauty and obscene power. Behind it came dozens of daemonettes, their crab-like claws clicking in anticipation, their voices singing songs that drove mortals mad with desire and horror combined. The daemon host had felt the presence of something new in this sector, something that touched upon Slaaneish's domain of sensation and pleasure, and the Dark Prince would not tolerate rivals. Nekari's 6 eyes fixed upon the hive spire below, seeing through the veil of reality to perceive the geometric patterns that had transformed it. The daemon felt disgust and curiosity in equal measure. These patterns were wrong, ordered where they should have been chaotic, precise where they should have been excessive. Whoever had done this understood sensation, but rejected the beautiful madness that should accompany it. This could not stand. The daemon host descended upon the transformed sections of Hive Tertius like a purple and pink tide, reality warping around them as they moved. Daemonettes shrieked their arrival, their voices promising pleasures that would shatter minds and break souls. They crashed through the geometric corridors, tearing at chains, seeking to replace cold order with hot chaos. They found the transformed citizens suspended in their careful arrangements and began to free them, not out of mercy but out of offense at the methodical nature of their configuration. Pinhead stood in the central chamber as the daemons arrived, flanked by a dozen other Cenobites who had emerged from various lament configurations across the sector. He watched the daemonettes approach with the same calm regard he had shown everything else, his expression neither concerned nor pleased, merely observant. When the first wave of all daemons reached him, their claws extended to rend and tear. Chains erupted from every surface simultaneously. The daemonettes found themselves caught, suspended, their forms held in place by links that seemed to appear from nowhere and everywhere at once. They thrashed and screamed, calling upon Slaaneish's power to break free, feeling the familiar rush of warp energy that should have shattered any mortal binding. The chains did not break. They did not even strain. Instead, they began to move, rotating the daemons into positions that were geometrically precise, displaying them as one might display specimens for study. Nekari strode forward, its massive form towering over the Cenobites. The Keeper of Secrets radiated power, the warp responding to its presence, reality bending around it like heat shimmer. It spoke in a voice that was 1,000 voices, each one promising different delights, different horrors. You dare to claim dominion over sensation in this realm. All pleasure belongs to the Prince of Excess. All pain that carries ecstasy belongs to the Dark Prince. You are nothing but crude imitators, pale shadows of true divine experience. Pinhead tilted his head, studying the greater daemon with the same clinical interest he had shown everything else. We are no imitators. We existed before your Prince of Excess was born from the death screams of the Eldar. We explored the nature of sensation when this galaxy was young and your chaos gods were nothing but distant possibilities. You are the imitators, Daemon. Crude, excessive, wasteful imitators who mistake volume for depth. The blasphemy of this statement caused the air itself to ripple with warp energy. Nikari's beautiful and terrible face contorted with rage. It raised one massive claw, warp fire gathering around it, power enough to unmake a tank or tear a hole through a ship's hull. The daemon struck downward with speed that left afterimages in the air. Pinhead raised his hand, palm outward, and the warp fire simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed, but ceased to exist, as if the fundamental laws that allowed it to manifest had been locally suspended. Dinkari's eyes widened in genuine surprise, an emotion greater daemons rarely experienced. Impossible, the daemon hissed. Nothing exists beyond the warp's touch. All of reality is merely the materium and immaterium in balance. You must draw from one or the other. Must we? Pinhead asked. His voice remained level, conversational, as if discussing philosophy rather than facing down one of Slaaneish's greatest servants. You speak from limitation, Daemon. Your warp is emotion made manifest. We are experience made manifest. Not the same thing. Not even related things. Your power flows from belief, from feeling, from the passions of mortal minds. Ours flows from something more fundamental. The simple fact of consciousness experiencing physical sensation that existed before emotions. It will exist after them. Pinhead moved forward. His step still measured, still precise. Chains emerged from his body, from the floor, from the walls, from spaces between spaces. They wrapped around Nikari's limbs, its torso, its neck. The greater daemon struggled, pulling upon all of Slaaneish's power, feeling the warp respond with fury at this challenge to its chosen servant. Reality cracked around the daemon. Purple lightning arcing outward, the very fabric of space-time straining under the pressure of so much warp energy concentrated in one place. The chains held. More than held, they tightened, pulling the daemon into a configuration that was mathematically perfect, geometrically sound, and utterly incompatible with the daemon's nature. Nikari felt something it had not felt in millennia of existence, genuine pain, unaccompanied by pleasure. Not the exquisite agony that fueled Slaaneish's domain, but pure clinical sensation stripped of all emotional context. It was horrifying in its simplicity. You see, Pinhead explained as he circled the bound daemon, your entire existence is predicated on the connection between physical sensation and emotional response. Pain brings pleasure. Pleasure brings obsession. Obsession brings excess. But we understand something you cannot. Sensation exists independent of emotion. One can experience without feeling. One can be conscious of stimulus without any accompanying psychological state. That is what we teach. That is what you fear. Nikari thrashed again, its voice losing its seductive quality, becoming raw and desperate. Release me! The Dark Prince will send legions! All of the warp will descend upon you. Let them come, Pinhead replied. We do not fear your warp. We are not vulnerable to it. Those who serve chaos can be corrupted because they already draw upon chaos's power. We draw upon nothing but the fundamental relationship between consciousness and flesh. There is nothing for your power to corrupt. Other Cenobites approached the captured daemonettes, studying them with professional interest. The female Cenobite ran her fingers along one daemon's form, tracing patterns that made the daemonette convulse. Not with the usual mixture of pain and pleasure that characterized Slaaneshi experience, but with pure sensory input divorced from any emotional component. The daemon's screams were confusion given voice, unable to process sensation that did not carry the familiar ecstatic charge. Shatterer circled another daemon, its teeth clicking in complex rhythms. The sound bypassed the daemon's defenses, reached into its consciousness, and began to deconstruct its very nature. Daemons were emotion, given form, belief made manifest. Chatterer's sounds carried no emotion, no belief, only information. Pure mathematical relationships expressed as audio frequencies. The daemonette began to destabilize, its form flickering as if unable to maintain coherence in the presence of something so fundamentally antithetical to its nature. Across the sector, similar scenes played out. Wherever Cenobites had manifested, Slaaneshi daemons attacked, seeking to reclaim their god's domain, and everywhere they failed. The warp's power, so overwhelming against mortal resistance, so irresistible to those who fought it on its own terms, found no purchase against beings who operated on entirely different principles. It was like trying to burn water or drown fire. The two forces simply did not interact in ways that Chaos's usual advantages could exploit. On the bridge of Inquisitor Covenant's battle barge, astropaths began screaming. The psychic choir that allowed communication across the vast distances of the Imperium found themselves perceiving something that should not be possible. They saw the Cenobites through their warp-attuned senses, but the Cenobites appeared as absences, as holes in reality that were not warp-based, as contradictions that their enhanced minds struggled to process. "They exist in negation," one astropath gasped, blood running from her eyes as she tried to articulate what she perceived. Not anti-warp like the pariahs, not null space like the Necron's technology. Something else. They are positive existence that happens to exclude warp interaction as a side effect of their fundamental nature. Covenant processed this information, adding it to the growing file of observations about the Cenobites. Every piece of data made them more dangerous, not because of what they could do, but because of what they represented. A threat that existed outside the Imperium's understanding of how reality worked. Not chaos, not Xenos, not even recognizable as material or immaterial in conventional terms. His vox crackled with an urgent transmission. Sister Seraphine's voice came through, tight with controlled fear. "Inquisitor, you need to see this. Lower hive levels, Section 47. We found Imperial citizens who opened lament configurations. They're choosing to go with the Cenobites, willingly, even after we've shown them. What becomes of those who are transformed?" Covenant felt cold certainty settling in his chest. He had seen chaos, corruption, spread through populations. It was always through deception, through promises that were lies, through slow degradation of will and reason. What Seraphine described was different. These were rational people making rational choices, even knowing the full consequences. That was infinitely more dangerous than any daemon's temptation. He found Seraphine in the lower hive standing before a gathering of approximately 200 citizens. Between them and the Sister of Battle stood 3 Cenobites, including one Covenant had not seen before. This one was female in form, her body covered in precise surgical modifications, each one placed according to principles of symmetry and mathematical beauty, rather than the random excess of chaos mutation. "These people claim they want to experience what the Cenobites offer," Seraphine explained, her voice carrying frustration and confusion. "I have explained that it means permanent transformation, that they will become something no longer recognizably human. They understand. They still choose this path." Covenant stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "Citizens of the Imperium, what you contemplate is rejection of the Emperor's design for humanity. It is abandonment of your duty to the species. It is, by any measure, heresy. Yet you stand here willingly. Explain yourselves." An elderly woman, her face lined with decades of labor in the hive factories, spoke first. "Inquisitor, I am 63 years old. I have worked every day of my life in the Prometheum refineries. I have breathed toxic fumes, lost 3 fingers to machinery malfunctions, buried 2 children who died from diseases the administratum says we cannot afford to cure. I have prayed to the Emperor every day, followed every law, done my duty without complaint. And what has it given me? More of the same. More suffering without meaning. More pain without purpose. The Cenobites offer something different. They say my suffering can have meaning beyond just being fuel for the Imperium's machinery. I choose to believe them." A younger man stepped forward, his arms bearing the marks of self-flagellation common among the most devout Imperial citizens. I have sought meaning and pain my entire life, Inquisitor. I have whipped myself bloody in the Emperor's name, have driven thorns into my flesh during prayer, have fasted until my body collapsed. The priests say this brings me closer to understanding the Emperor's sacrifice. But I feel nothing. No transcendence, no revelation. Just pain and the emptiness after. The Cenobites say they can show me what I have been seeking. They say they can make the sensation mean something. One by one, others spoke. Factory workers, hive menials, even a few low-level administratum scribes, all telling variations of the same story. Lives of suffering accepted as necessary, pain endured without question, but also without any true understanding or meaning beyond serving as small cogs in the Imperium's vast machinery. The Cenobites offered something the Imperium could not, the promise that their pain could be understood, experienced fully, given purpose beyond simple duty. Covenant realized with growing horror that these people were not corrupted in any traditional sense. They had not lost their reason. They had not been deceived. They had simply found the Imperium's bargain insufficient. The promise of suffering in the Emperor's name was not enough when that suffering carried no personal meaning, no individual transcendence, only collective utility. This is what makes them more dangerous than chaos, he said quietly to Seraphine. Chaos corrupts through deception and weakness. The Cenobites simply offer an alternative philosophy, and some people, when given a genuine choice, choose it. Before Seraphine could respond, golden light flooded the chamber. Both Inquisitor and Sister fell to their knees as psychic pressure crashed over them like a physical wave. The citizens gasped and prostrated themselves. Even the Cenobites paused, their attention turning toward the source of the light. A Grey Knight chaplain strode into the chamber, but his movements carried an authority beyond his rank. His armor blazed with golden fire, psychic energy radiating from him in visible waves. When he spoke, his voice resonated with harmonics that suggested something far greater than a single individual spoke through him. Enough, the possessed chaplain declared, and the single word carried weight that made the air vibrate. The Emperor's consciousness, stretched thin across the entire Imperium, had focused a fragment of his vast attention upon this moment, speaking through a vessel strong enough to contain even a portion of his power. The Cenobites turned as one to face this new presence. Pinhead, who had been examining Nekeri's continued struggles, walked forward with his usual measured pace. He regarded the possessed chaplain with the same clinical interest he showed everything, studying the golden light, the psychic manifestation, the way reality bent around this focused divine attention. So, Pinhead said calmly, "The Emperor of Mankind notices us at last. We have felt your consciousness touching the edges of our work, observing without interfering. Do you now choose to act?" The possessed chaplain's eyes blazed brighter, golden tears of pure psychic energy running down the helmet's surface. "You are an impossibility in a universe that cannot afford impossibilities. Neither materium nor immaterium, neither mortal nor daemon, neither ally nor enemy in any conventional sense. What are you, and why have you come to my Imperium?"
"We are experience, made manifest,"
Pinhead replied. "We exist because consciousness requires experience to define itself. We have come because we were summoned, because beings in your Imperium opened our configurations, because they sought what we offer. We do not invade, we answer calls. Though we take not only those who call, but also those who stand in our way, those whose desire is written in their actions, even if they deny it with words." The golden light intensified, and those watching felt the Emperor's vast intelligence analyzing, calculating, considering options across timescales and probability branches too complex for mortal minds to follow. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a decision that would reshape the sector. You cannot be destroyed by conventional means. You cannot be banished like daemons. You cannot be corrupted like mortals. You exist outside the paradigms my Imperium was built to address, but you are also not entirely hostile. You take those who seek you, and some who interfere, but you do not wage war for conquest. You operate by rules, even if those rules are alien to humanity's understanding. There is structure in what you do, Order, rather than chaos. Pinhead inclined his head slightly. You understand better than your servants, as we expected. You have experienced 10,000 years of sensation without respite, consciousness without escape, awareness of every moment of your suffering. You know what we teach better than anyone in this reality. Experience divorced from emotion, sensation as pure information, the body as instrument for consciousness to understand itself. The possessed chaplain was silent for a long moment, and those present felt the massive weight of the Emperor's consideration. Finally, he spoke again, and his words would change everything. I offer a bargain. The journey to Terra took 18 days through the warp, though for Inquisitor Covenant it felt like 18 years. He traveled aboard a black ship, the specialized vessels that transported psychers to Terra for soul binding or consumption by the Emperor. With him came Pinhead and 3 other Cenobites, contained not by chains or force fields, but by agreement. They had accepted the Emperor's invitation to present themselves before the Golden Throne itself, to negotiate terms face to face, consciousness to consciousness. Sister Seraphine accompanied them, her presence requested specifically by the Emperor's command. She had not spoken much during the journey, spending her time in prayer and contemplation. Covenant noticed she had increased her flagellation rituals, the self-inflicted wounds on her arms and back growing more severe. He wondered if she was trying to prove something to herself, or perhaps understand something about what the Cenobites represented. The Black Ship's navigator, a 3-eyed mutant whose family had guided Imperial vessels for 6,000 years, reported unusual phenomena during transit. The warp itself seemed to recoil from the Cenobites' presence, not in fear but in confusion, as if the Imperium could not properly perceive them. Daemon entities that normally harassed ships in transit gave their vessel wide berth, sensing something they could not categorize and instinctively avoiding it. Terror resolved in the viewing ports as they emerged from the warp at the edge of the Sol system. Covenant had seen humanity's birthworld 3 times before in his 70 years of service, but it never failed to inspire awe and dread in equal measure. The planet was unrecognizable from ancient records, its surface completely covered in cityscapes that reached kilometers into the sky. Orbital structures so numerous they formed rings around the world like Saturn's bands. At the heart of it all stood the Imperial Palace, a mountain range of architecture that housed trillions and dominated an entire continent. Pinhead observed Terra through the viewing port with his usual calm regard. "Impressive?" he said, his voice carrying neither mockery nor admiration, merely acknowledgement of fact. "Your species has built much in service to survival, but at what cost to individual meaning? We see billions of lives, each one reduced to function within machinery so vast that personal experience becomes irrelevant." Covenant felt anger rise in his chest, but suppressed it. He had learned during the journey that arguing philosophy with Pinhead was pointless. The Cenobite operated from premises so fundamentally different that common ground was impossible to establish. Better to let the Emperor himself address such matters. They docked at an orbital station reserved for the most sensitive Imperial business. Custodian guards awaited them, 10 warriors in golden armor that gleamed with inner light. Their guardian spears were held at Covenant, but Covenant noticed the weapon's energy fields were active, humming with barely restrained power. Even the Emperor's own guards were uncertain how to categorize the threat before them. The shield captain who led them wore a helmet shaped like an eagle's head, its features stern and unforgiving. He addressed the group without preamble. "The Emperor has decreed that the entities known as Cenobites will be granted audience before the Golden Throne. This is unprecedented. You will follow our escort precisely. Any deviation will be met with immediate termination, regardless of consequences." Pinhead inclined his head. "We understand. We came in good faith. We will honor the terms of engagement." They descended to Terra's surface in a heavily shielded transport, passing through layer upon layer of orbital defenses that could reduce entire fleets to vapor. The palace itself loomed larger as they approached, its scale defying comprehension. Spires reached into the clouds, each one large enough to house millions. Statues of Space Marine Primarchs stood hundreds of meters tall, their stone faces watching over the masses that lived in their shadows. The processional route took them through sections of the palace that few living humans had ever seen. Chambers where the High Lords of Terra convened to make decisions affecting trillions. Vaults containing technology from the Dark Age that even the Mechanicus feared to study. Cathedrals where millions gathered to pray, their combined faith strengthening the Emperor's psychic presence across the galaxy. In one such cathedral, they passed through crowds of pilgrims who had traveled decades to reach Terra. These faithful pressed forward to touch even the shadow of the custodians, believing proximity to the Emperor's guards would bring blessing. When Pinhead walked past, several pilgrims gasped and fell back. They could not articulate why, but something in the Cenobites' presence unsettled them on a level deeper than conscious thought. Sister Seraphine noticed this and spoke for the first time since boarding the transport. They fear you because they sense you are not part of the natural order they understand. You exist outside the Emperor's design. Do we? Pinhead asked. Or do we exist within a design so vast that your Emperor's plans are merely one aspect of it? Consciousness requires experience to have meaning. That truth existed before your Emperor, before humanity, before this galaxy formed. We are not outside natural order, sister. We are fundamental to it. They reached the Sanctum Imperialis, the innermost chambers of the palace, where the golden throne resided. The doors before them were adamantium, 50 meters tall, inscribed with wards that had been crafted by the Emperor himself during the heresy. Custodians stood in ranks before it, hundreds of them, the greatest concentration of the Emperor's personal guards outside the throne room itself. The shield captain activated ancient mechanisms, and the massive doors swung open with a sound like thunder. Beyond lay a corridor that seemed to extend into infinity, its walls lined with more custodians standing in perfect stillness. The psychic pressure in the air became palpable, pressing down on Covenant's consciousness like deep ocean water. He had been this close to the Emperor once before, and remembered the sensation as barely survivable even with his training. Pinhead walked forward without hesitation, his steps measured and precise as always. The other Cenobites followed. Behind them, Covenant and Seraphine struggled forward, each step requiring conscious effort against the weight of divine attention focused ahead. The throne room itself defied description. It was vast enough to contain entire cities, its ceiling lost in darkness high above, its walls covered in technology that blended science and mysticism so thoroughly that they became indistinguishable. At the center of it all sat the golden throne, and, upon it, the Emperor of mankind. His physical form was a withered husk, barely recognizable as human, kept alive by machinery that spanned millennia of accumulated technology. Tubes and wires connected his body to systems that extended throughout the palace and beyond, tapping into the very foundations of Terra itself. But his psychic presence was overwhelming, a golden light that filled the chamber, that pressed against consciousness itself, that seemed to perceive every thought, every memory, every possibility and probability branching from this moment. Pinhead approached within 50 meters of the throne and stopped. He did not kneel, did not prostrate himself, but stood with the same calm regard he showed everything. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, without words, communication began. Those present felt it as pressure in their minds, concepts too large for language flowing between the Emperor and Pinhead. Covenant, his psychic training, allowing him to perceive fragments of this exchange, understood they were negotiating. The Emperor presented the problem. The Cenobites destabilized the careful balance of faith and authority that held the Imperium together. Their very existence challenged the theological framework that justified imperial rule. Citizens who believed the Emperor's suffering had unique meaning found that meaning undermined when the Cenobites suggested all suffering was merely sensation, awaiting proper understanding. Pinhead countered with equal clarity. The Imperium's denial of individual experience created vulnerability to chaos. Citizens who were taught to endure suffering without seeking meaning became susceptible to Slaanesha's promises of sensation with purpose. The Cenobites offered an alternative that was ordered rather than chaotic, structured rather than excessive. They took those who genuinely sought them and those whose desire was implicit in their actions, even if unspoken. The debate continued, concepts flowing faster than mortal minds could fully process. Covenant caught fragments, the nature of consciousness, the relationship between physical sensation and meaning, the question of whether order through experience was compatible with faith in divine purpose. Both participants operated from premises so fundamental that common ground seemed impossible. Then, the Emperor shifted the discussion. Images flooded the room, visible to all present. They saw Slaaneshi cults spreading across multiple sectors, pleasure worlds where entire populations had fallen to excess, daemon incursions that cost billions of lives. They saw the Cenobites work, the geometric precision with which they transformed willing participants and those who interfered. The way their presence seemed to create zones where chaos corruption decreased because those seeking sensation found the Cenobites first. A pattern emerged. In sectors where the Cenobites had manifested, Slaaneshi activity dropped by measurable percentages, not because the Cenobites actively fought chaos, but because they intercepted those who might otherwise have turned to the Dark Prince. They were, in effect, a competing philosophy that drew from the same pool of potential converts. The Emperor's consciousness focused more intensely, golden light blazing brighter. Covenant felt the weight of the decision being considered, probability branches calculating across timescales spanning centuries. Finally, words formed, not spoken, but impressed directly upon every mind in the chamber. I offer this bargain. You may remain in my Imperium under specific conditions. It is not hands that call you, but desire. You will answer those calls as your nature demands. Those whose souls reach for you, whether through conscious choice or implicit action, may be yours. But you will not wage campaigns of conversion. You will not advertise your presence beyond allowing your configurations to be found. In exchange, you will serve a purpose. You will be a filter, catching those who might otherwise fall to Slaanesh, giving them an ordered alternative to chaotic excess. Pinhead considered this in silence that stretched for several minutes. The other Cenobites remained perfectly still, awaiting his decision. When he finally responded, his voice carried clearly, despite making no effort to project. You ask us to become part of your Imperium's machinery, to serve a function within your grand design. This is acceptable, with one condition. We will not pretend to be what we are not. Those who come to us must understand they choose something outside your theology, something that neither confirms nor denies your divinity, but simply exists alongside it. We will not be used to reinforce your authority, only to provide genuine alternative to chaos. The Emperor's presence seemed to pulse, consideration given to this counteroffer. Then, agreement flowed through the chamber like a wave of warmth against the usual cold of the throne room. So be it. But know this. Priest of the Order of the Gash, I do not trust you. I do not believe your philosophy serves humanity's ultimate good, but I recognize necessity when it presents itself. You are useful. That utility purchases your continued existence in my realm. Should you cease to be useful, should your presence become more dangerous than chaos itself, I will find ways to eliminate you, regardless of your unusual nature. Pinhead inclined his head. We expected nothing less. We do not seek your trust, Emperor of mankind. Only your acknowledgement that experience and faith can coexist, that consciousness requires both structure and meaning, and that sometimes meaning emerges from experience itself rather than being imposed from above. The negotiation concluded. Terms established through psychic contract that bound both parties more surely than any written agreement. The Cenobites would remain. Lament configurations would spread, appearing through dimensional breaches where desire was strongest, officially classified as dangerous Xenos artifacts, but not actively suppressed. Those who sought them would find them. Those who solved them would meet their makers. And the Imperium would watch, monitor, and calculate whether the bargain served humanity's survival. Covenant felt profound unease settling in his chest. The Emperor had just legitimized beings that operated outside Imperial theology, that challenged the fundamental premises upon which the Imperium was built. Yes, the practical benefits were clear. Yes, intercepting potential Slaanesh cultists served humanity's interest. But the cost was acknowledging that the Emperor's way was not the only way. that alternatives existed, that citizens could choose paths outside imperial doctrine and not be immediately condemned as heretics. Sister Seraphine's reaction was more visceral. She fell to her knees, her body shaking. "How can this be?" she whispered. "How can the Emperor permit such beings to exist within his realm?" Possessed chaplain who had first manifested the Emperor's consciousness on Carrion Prime approached her. Golden light still flickered around his form, though dimmer now as the Emperor's direct attention withdrew. He spoke, his words carrying both human compassion and divine authority. "Sister, you serve the Emperor through suffering you inflict upon yourself. Believing this brings you closer to understanding his sacrifice. But you have never truly examined what you experience, have you? You feel the pain, endure it, then move on. The Cenobites would say you waste that experience, that you could learn far more from it if you truly explored what your body tells you. Perhaps they are not entirely wrong." Seraphine looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Are you saying I should seek them out? That my devotion is insufficient?" "I am saying," the chaplain replied, "that faith and understanding need not be enemies. The Emperor makes no demands that you change your practice. But neither does he forbid you from seeking deeper meaning in the pain you already choose to endure. The choice, as always, is yours." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Covenant understood the true horror of what had just occurred. The Emperor had not merely permitted the Cenobites to exist. He had suggested that their philosophy held merit, that seeking understanding through experience was not inherently heretical. The theological implications would reverberate through the Imperium for generations. They departed the throne room in silence, making the long journey back through the palace's infinite corridors. The Cenobites were escorted to chambers that had been prepared for them, deep in the catacombs beneath the palace where the most dangerous secrets were kept. Official records would list them as Xenos entities under containment. Unofficial knowledge would spread among those with sufficient clearance. The Cenobites were sanctioned, permitted, given limited freedom to operate within Imperial space. 3 weeks later, Covenant stood in his quarters aboard his battle barge, now reassigned to monitor Cenobite activity across the sector. Reports flowed across his desk. A lament configuration had appeared in the hands of a pleasure cult on Vaxos Prime. The cultists, about to summon a keeper of secrets, solved the box instead. The Cenobites came. The cultists chose transformation. Some who tried to flee were taken as well, desire read in their actions despite their words. The daemon remained unsummoned. Net result: 120 fewer potential chaos cultists. 120 transformed into living architecture, but no daemon incursion, no warp corruption spreading. Another report: a noble house on Sanctum had discovered a configuration in their archives. The eldest son, suffering from injuries sustained in war, constant pain that no medicine could ease, opened the box seeking either relief or understanding. The Cenobites took him. His family mourned, but the alternative would have been decades more of meaningless suffering, or turning to forbidden solutions. Net result: ambiguous, but not actively harmful to Imperial interests. Sister Seraphine entered without announcement, as was her right as his aide. She looked different, though Covenant could not immediately identify how. Then he noticed. The ritual scars on her arms had changed pattern, become more geometric, more precise. She had been studying the Cenobites' work, trying to understand their approach to pain and sensation. "I have made a decision," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "I am going to seek them out, not to abandon the Emperor, but to understand what he understands. If he endures 10,000 years of suffering and maintains meaning through it, there must be something in the experience itself, beyond mere duty. The Cenobites claim they can teach that understanding. I need to know if they speak truth." Covenant wanted to stop her, to sport, forbid it, to invoke his authority as Inquisitor. But he could not. The Emperor himself had suggested this path was not heretical, that seeking understanding through experience was permissible. Who was Covenant to contradict divine judgment? "If you do this," he said quietly, "there is no going back. You will be transformed." You will cease to be the Sister Seraphine I have known. She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he had seen on her face in the years they had served together. Perhaps I will become the Sister Seraphine I was meant to be. Perhaps understanding the Emperor's sacrifice requires experiencing what he experiences, truly experiencing it, not just enduring it. The Cenobites offer that. The Emperor permits it. How can I refuse? She left without waiting for his response. Covenant knew he would see her again, but changed, transformed, existing in a state of experience he could not comprehend. He thought of the Emperor upon the golden throne, suffering for 10,000 years, with full consciousness of every moment. He thought of Pinhead's words, that the Emperor understood their philosophy better than anyone. He thought of the bargain that had been struck, the compromise between faith and experience. The lament configurations sat on his desk, delivered by unknown means while he had been reviewing reports. It was beautiful, intricate, its surfaces covered in patterns that seemed to shift when observed indirectly. He could pick it up, could solve its geometric puzzles, could summon the Cenobites and ask them to explain what they offered. The Emperor had given permission, after all. The path was sanctioned. Covenant stared at the box for a long time. Then he placed it in a sealed container and locked it in his personal vault. Not yet. Perhaps never. But the fact that he considered it at all, that the option existed and was not automatically heretical, that was the true victory the Cenobites had won. Across the Imperium, in deep places and dark corners, dimensional breaches opened where desire burned strongest. Lament configurations appeared, delivered through tears, in reality that followed no warp signatures, no patterns the Imperium could track or prevent. Those who sought sensation, who craved understanding, who could no longer bear suffering without meaning, found them. The Cenobites came when summoned. They took those who truly wished to go, and those whose actions spoke louder than their denials. And the Imperium watched, calculated, and accepted that sometimes the enemy of your enemy was not your friend, but could still serve your purpose. In the grim darkness of the far future, there was only war. But now, for those who sought it, there was also something else. Not salvation, not damnation, but experience. Pure, undiluted, perfectly understood experience. The Cenobites had such sights to show them, and the Emperor of mankind himself had given permission for those sights to be seen. Hell was now officially sanctioned. The boxes bore no imperial seal, but neither were they forbidden. And in the deepest chambers of Terra, in a section of the catacombs where even custodians rarely ventured, Pinhead stood before a wall, displaying the entire Imperium mapped in light. He studied the sectors, calculating which populations carried the greatest concentration of unexplored desire, which worlds held citizens most likely to solve their configurations, which hives contained souls reaching out for understanding even if they did not yet know it. Behind him, other Cenobites worked, arranging chambers in geometric patterns, preparing spaces for those who would come. Not many, perhaps, not even most, but enough, always enough. The Order of the Gash had found fertile ground in humanity's twilight empire, and they would cultivate it with the same methodical precision they brought to all their work. Experience awaited, and desire would always find its answer.